So I'm here at Wolverhampton races. A long time since I've been here. Last time I was at a jump track with Eddie Fremantle, well-known face on racecourses for the last, well, more decades than I've been coming. Thanks, Eddie, for agreeing to do this. Can you tell us from the start how your interest in racing started, please?
Yeah, my mum used to take me racing when I was quite small, and I went to point when I was about 5 and just backed some horses, and they all won, and so I got the bug for it. I think that's how it starts for a lot of people, doesn't it? They back winners and they don't really want to stop again. And then I went to Ascot with her when I was a little bit older, and again I backed winners. The first 3 winners, I'm sure they were all favourites. La Salle won the Gold Cup that year, so that would be going back to the mid or early 70s. And a horse called Balliol won one of the big sprints there. I remember their names, but I don't really remember much else about it. But the 4th race I do remember, I backed a loser and I wanted to go home then. And as we were going out of the race course, past the pre-parade ring, my mum saw this horse called Zarb, and she said, "That's going to win this next race, it looks fantastic." And I said, no, we've got to go home now, I'm fed up, I can't back any more losers, I can only back winners. And of course Zarb won that race, and so that gave me an idea that looking at horses is a bit of an inkling to their possibilities. I mean, she was a very good paddock judge, although she didn't go racing very often. That's how I started, really, and it grew from that. As a teenager, I used to get all the books and study the form and have a few bets. Gradually I got more and more into it.
So how did the journalism start? Because I do believe you were a fairly young man on the spot for the Sporting Life.
Yeah, that was a sort of second job I had. First of all, I met a guy on the train, a man called Ian Davies, who was the deputy editor of the Racing and Football Outlook. We were on our way to Ludlow, and we chatted and we shared the journey back. It's a long way back from Ludlow to London. I mean, you only have to go halfway when you go there, Simon, but it's still an old trek to Ludlow. So we got to know each other there, and he said, "Oh well." A few months later, he rang me up and he offered me a job at the Racing and Football Outlook. So he'd been impressed with me. He'd now become the editor in the meantime, and so he offered me a job doing some racing predictions, but also as a general sports tipster. And I was tipping all sorts of different sports, whatever. Sports betting was in its infancy effectively then. There was a lot of football, athletics, cricket and various minority sports, and I really didn't know what I was doing, but I had to have a bit of a guess up and study the form for things, and even did the Booker Prize that year. This would have been the mid-80s, and from there I went on to the Sporting Life and became a man on the spot at the Sporting Life, and I was there for 4 years before I went on to my own punting on the racecourse, mainly on my own.
Talking about your man on the spot, there's a little story that I wrote about a while back. Boot scraper. You inadvertently almost foiled a gamble there by tipping it up.
I thought this might come up. Yes, a fellow called Stephen Flurry owned the horse Boot Scraper, and I'd seen him running in. He was trained by either John or Rodney Baker. I think John had finished by then. I think it was Rodney Baker. It was an ex-Irish horse and had some very decent juvenile hurdle form in Ireland. Came to England, hadn't shown a lot, but it has shown enough to me to think that they're going to have a go with it one day, and I napped it in the Sporting Life. And Stephen came up to me at the races at Exeter that day. He wasn't very pleased. He says, "They tell me you're the one who's ruined the price." And I sort of had to think of some story to try and dissuade him from being extremely angry rather than just very angry. And I said, "Well, look, at least Stephen, at least you know, if he wins, there's not going to be too much of an inquiry because the racing papers have given him a good G," and that seemed to suffice a little bit. Anyway, Boot Scraper did win, and he wasn't too short a price. But it was a big gamble, and you know, I may have spoiled their day a little bit, I suppose, but at least he won.
I think Stephen Little laid in 9,002 and it went off at 6-4.
Well, there we go. They got their money at 9-2. It wasn't so bad.
So apart from the bottom line, how do you suddenly realise that you've become a successful professional punter as opposed to somebody that just
I mean, ever since those days, I did have a period when I was only doing one thing. I was only punting, and then I could class myself as a professional. But I've gone back into the media a bit because I was offered a tipster's job at the Observer, and I took it mainly because it gave me the press badge, and it was good value for me to have that, and you'd be able to use the press facilities. Of course, nowadays there's Wi-Fi and so on. That's very helpful, and I still do a bit of media work for Racing UK, as you probably know, Simon. It's so I couldn't class myself as purely a professional punter. I back horses to make money, and I have a media career as well, and that's worked very well for me.
And one of the things I read when I was researching you, a few of your rules, this is going back a bit, fly in the face of everybody else, do chase your losses,
Yeah,
and keep your betting, keep turnover high. Is that still...
That was a reaction really to these golden rules of betting that people say, never chase your losses. Well, I think if you don't chase your losses, you're never going to get them back. When I say chase, I don't mean go absolutely crazy and have large sums on to try and win your losses back, but don't stop betting as a result of losing. You've got to keep going. If you think you're good at what you do and that you can make money at it, if you've had a few losers, it doesn't mean you're no good. It just means that the things haven't gone your way, and keep on plugging away, keep on betting. What was the other golden rule that I...
you keep your turnover high.
Yeah, I think sometimes I've got to force myself. I think there's a very low percentage takeout in racing these days. Most races are close to 100% or even over broke if you're looking at the best prices available all day on horses. I think it's important to bet often from my point of view. Some people haven't got that temperament. They're much better off having one bet occasionally. I feel like I want a bit more action. So some races I'll go, well, look, they're betting to no percentage. I really ought to get involved here, even though I don't necessarily fancy something. I still feel that overall, if you're betting when the markets are close to 100%, you ought to be able to win.